Hello everybody. Today we're gonna look further into developing Pico editor, the online source code editor that we built completely from scratch using no frameworks and only TypeScript. So in today's video, we're gonna look into how to start making structure for our software. We are still using this single package, Pico editor browser, but we are already start thinking in terms of classes and components into which we want to break down our functionality. So I modify the index.ts file here, and it still creates elements in document object model in the browser. I added two elements here, three elements, sorry, the editor element, the cursor element, and the document element. I then append the editor element to the body, and then I add a cursor and document elements to the editor element. So editor element acts like a wrapper to the other two elements. So basically, if we look here, the cursor here, which is blinking, which is just a simple CSS trick, which I will show you later. And I start typing things, sorry, not here, but in the Pico editor. What you will actually see that in the DOM, let me open this up for you. Let me close the console. So here is the DOM structure we will be working. So this is a div, this is an anonymous div, which is an editor element, and it wraps two other elements that I have created. One is a cursor, and it also has a class blinker to this blinking effect, and a class document which contains the editor content, the document contents that I'm typing into it. Right? Use backspace. Okay, let's move on. We start giving our software, our editor, a little bit of structure, and we are following MVC structural pattern here, which breaks down our software into three main classes. And these are models, views, and controllers. I already created three models that are currently empty. So the editor model, the document model, this actually has some very minimalistic logic in it already, and the cursor model, which is also empty. I then wired up models into the views, so the special classes that have a logic on how to display things based on the values that are in the model. And the thing that wires views and models together are controllers. And today I only have a single controller, the document controller, which I will show later on. Another thing that we are adding today is the dispatcher. This is following inspired by the Flux architectural pattern, in which all the actions that the users do in our editor, like typing things or removing an app with backspace, they are wrapped into actions, and then the dispatcher, the action dispatcher, sends those actions to all the controllers that might be interested in those actions. So let's have a look at the very simple dispatcher. Again, we are not using any framework to build the editor, and see how you can build a very minimalistic action dispatcher. So this is a class that has a private list of controllers, and the controller is just an interface that needs to have only one method, which is an execute action. And our dispatcher has two public methods. One is a register controller. This is how dispatcher knows which controllers exist in our application. And another method called dispatch, which just cycles through all the controllers that are known to the dispatcher, and then just calls execute action on that controller, passing on the action that is being dispatched. So let's see how the actions are created. So in my index.ts, I still have two event listeners that I add to the document object model. And you might remember it from the first session. The events that I'm interested in are key press and key down. But now, instead of directly modifying the things that you see in the editor, I will decouple the logic of handling the events for the user and also bringing changes to the models and then reflecting them in the view. So let's see how it's all wired together in the code. So let's take the first event, the key press. So the key press, when the key is pressed, we check which key was actually pressed. Was it an enter key or was it any other key that was pressed? And if it's, for example, any other key, I create a type character action here, passing my passing the key value that was pressed to the action. So let's have a look at type character action. So the actions classes are actually just the containers for data. They don't have any logic. You just type things here. So our dispatcher, or actually not a dispatcher, but the controllers, they need to distinguish one action from another. That's why every action has the action type. Let's actually have a look here. So the action is an interface. So if I want to create any action, like pasting text together, adding another cursor to the document, deleting text, or removing strings or duplicating strings, if I want to create an action like that in my editor, I would need to implement this interface. And this interface, we see it has just two fields. One is the action type, which is a field called type. Actually, this type shows what kind of action was done by the user, and the data field that contains additional data associated with that particular instance of the action. So if we look into the action types, Pico editor right now supports only two action types, and the type character and the mid character. So type things or the backspace. These are the only two actions that our editor supports. And let's see. So we were looking into the type character action, right? So this one just has a constructor which is a typed character information here, and when the client of this class wants to know the data, this is what we return to them. So if you're interested in what character was typed, you need to get it through the data field, which is codified in this interface, and then look into the text field of the returned object. So again, if we look into the type character action, this is how we create an action here and instantiate this class here. And after that, we are dispatching the action to the dispatcher. So we already saw this. When we dispatch the action, we just go through all the controllers that are known to the dispatcher, and we call the execute action. So the only controller that is currently known to the dispatcher is the document controller. So again, follow me here, please. We have the document controller, and let's have the code right now, which implements the controller interface, which means it should have the execute action method, and this execute action method gets executed every time when I press the key in my end. So every letter of the word hello that I typed actually became a separate action. So there were 5 actions dispatched when I typed hello. And let's see what happens next. So the controller, in this case the document controller, reacts to various actions. Right now it reacts to the type character action and to the delete character action. So let's have a look at the implementation of the type character action. So first we check what type of the action is being executed, and once we verify it's a type character, we check if the data of that action actually has a text field shown earlier, and after that the controller calls the model, in this case the document model, and it calls the add character method. So the document model, which is a representation of the current state of text that is being displayed in the editor, and therefore it has a private field called text. We have an add character method which just adds the character to the text, as simple as that. And the wiring element comes actually in the next line. This view update is being called after we modify any model. So again, the controller here knows both about the document model and the document view. The document model is a container for your data. So it is a container for the text that is currently being displayed in the editor. And the document view is a class that is responsible for displaying that content. So let's have a look at the document view now. So the document view knows about the model, and it knows about the element in the document object model of the browser. So once we instantiate the document view, and that happens in the index.ts. So here, first thing to notice is that we pass the document model both to the document view and to the document controller. So the instances of the document view and the document controller share the same model. That's why when I change something in the document model, actually both classes, document controller and document view, can know that this change happened. This is what happens in the document view. So when the controller calls the update method of the view, it sets up the inner text field of the element in the document object model, and it just sets the inner text to be whatever the model getText method returns. And the getText is just a public wrapper method around a private field called text. So actually what happens here, do backspace here when I type hello, 5 actions were triggered. It means that our view updated the inner text 5 times.
Let's have a look at another action that we have so far in the editor, and that's the delete character action. So every time when I hit the backspace button, the delete character action is being instantiated. It has the start and end parameters in it, and let's see what the document controller does with a delete character. So when we find out that it's indeed a delete character, we verify that the start and end fields are in the data of that action, and then we call the slice method of the model, which just translated to a string slice right now, that just removes the character from the end of the string, right? If you call the slice with a 0 and -1 parameters. And then the same thing happens, we call the view update, and the view update just changes the whole text of the document object model element. So again, to emphasize this is not the most performant strategy to update the document object model, but it works for now, and along the way we will be implementing the more performant implementation of this update method. And the last thing that we have so far is the blinking of the cursor. You notice that the cursor is not moving. This is a subject to the next videos, but at least we have a cursor displayed already, and it's blinking like the blinking cursor in other editors that you used to. So let's have a look. We have a cursor view class here. No business logic here, just adds the classes to the element. And let's have a brief look at the CSS that defines those classes. So this is a cursor. We define it's 1 pixel wide, it is 20 pixel height, and it has an animation. So 1.5 seconds, it would just change the opacity from 0 to 1 and from 1 to 0 again. And that's how you reach the blinking effect. So thanks a lot for watching. I do have the whole roadmap for the Pico editor here in the roadmap MD file. You can check the link to GitHub for this project, and let me know which of these features you are most interested in, or maybe you have a new feature in mind that is not listed here still. Thank you. See you next time.